Come with me if you want to live. Do exactly what I say. Do you understand? Do you understand?
Please, don't hurt me.
I'm here to help you. You've been targeted for termination. All right, listen. The Terminator's an infiltration unit. Part man, part machine. It can't be reasoned with. It doesn't feel pity. And it absolutely will not stop until you are dead.
There are films that reflect their time and those that shape it. James Cameron's The Terminator, released in 1984, did both. Emerging from the haze of Reagan-era America, nestled in the golden age of practical effects and Cold War anxieties, this low-budget sci-fi thriller exploded onto the scene like a synthetic fist through a car window. Before The Terminator became a franchise and a cultural touchstone, it was a risky gamble by a group of hungry, unproven creators. James Cameron, fresh off being fired from his first directorial job, poured his dreams and nightmares into a screenplay inspired by a fever dream. Arnold Schwarzenegger was cast against type as the antagonist, a literal machine stripped of emotion, empathy, and remorse. And Linda Hamilton, relatively unknown at the time, would bring unexpected depth and fragility to a character who had come to define the modern action heroine. Everything about this film, from its unlikely cast and crew to its guerrilla-style production and shoestring budget, screamed underdog. And yet, like the relentless cyborg at its core, the Terminator refused to be ignored.
Everybody put their heart and soul into this picture. And it shows, because the passion definitely shows up on the screen. Gail's passion, Jim's passion, Arnold's passion. I mean, the actors were all committed.
And I think that makes a difference. I think it shows in the film.
We were naive enough at that point not to realize it was an impossible dream. And I think because of that naivete, we were able to actually pull it off.
At a time when artificial intelligence was still a speculative concept and computers had yet to invade every facet of daily life, the Terminator was already grappling with questions we're only now beginning to fully confront. The idea of Skynet, a self-aware machine intelligence that determines humanity must be eradicated, was terrifying because it felt like a prophecy. And yet, for all its machine logic, the movie is filled with passion, romance, sacrifice, and human resilience. Sarah Connor's journey from an unremarkable waitress to the mother of humanity's last hope is one of the greatest character arcs in science fiction history. Kyle Reese, the soldier from a dead future, travels back not just to protect her, but to lay out her destiny and give her something to fight for, a vision of the future worth saving. The love story at the heart of this film is not tacked on. It is essential, organic, and truly utterly heartbreaking. Technically, The Terminator is a marvel. Brad Feidel's synth-heavy score is both haunting and propulsive. The practical effects carry a grit and tactility that make the violence feel real and the threat visceral. The cinematography captures the sleazy underbelly of 1980s LA, and Cameron's direction is sharp, focused, and economically brilliant. There isn't a wasted frame, not a single moment that doesn't build tension or expand the world. It is a masterclass in low-budget filmmaking, a blueprint in how to make every dollar work.
It was a finite amount of money that we had to make this picture. When Jim needed additional shots, he either went out and shot them, or he hired, or let's say, the most DP he could afford for the money out of his own wallet.
It was the income coming in as director going back out, into the shooting.
And they would go and have a little guerrilla ragtag team of filmmakers and go shoot the shot.
There was one point where we wanted to see that the Terminator was outside Sarah and Ginger's apartment, and we didn't have that shot. So we went up to the house where I lived, and we spray painted the doors black to match the color of the sliding glass door in their apartment, and we didn't have the shoes anymore, so we spray painted the shoes just to get that one shot.
Hey guys, what's happening? Nihat here with Film Comics Explained, and in this breakdown and review, we'll dive deep into every aspect of The Terminator, from its production, the T-800 antagonist, to its narrative brilliance, character work, and technical prowess.
I don't think the studio knew what they had. I know that they didn't know what they had.
If they did, they would have thrown a lot more money at it, and they probably wouldn't have let Jim direct it.
Initially, the studio perceived it as a down-and-dirty action exploitation film.
Like a Charles Bronson film, 1 week in and out.
After, let's say, the negative word of mouth
I made the statement that as a science fiction film, we should sell it on its own merits because that's a very particular audience. He said, "This is not a science fiction film." I was dumbfounded. I said, "Yeah, it is." He said, "No, it's not." I said, "It's a science fiction film." He said, "You can't sell this as a science fiction film. Star Wars is science fiction. If you promise that, people are going to feel betrayed if they go into a theater and you're telling them it's science fiction and it's this." I said, "Well, it does involve time travel and robots, two of the biggest mainstays of science fiction. All science fiction films aren't necessarily about space travel." He didn't get it.
In 1981, James Cameron was in Rome working on post-production for Piranha 2: The Spawning, a notoriously bad horror sequel that would eventually get him fired. Sick with food poisoning, Cameron was bedridden in his hotel room, shivering with a high fever. In that state, he had a dream, a nightmare really, of a relentless metallic endoskeleton emerging from flames, dragging itself forward to kill.
It's really funny. Jim has said over the years that he always loved nightmares because they gave him great imagery, and like pleasant, happy dreams were just sort of a waste of time, you know.
He called me one morning and said in a fever dream he had this vision.
I began doing some drawings of it, and I saw that it was a robot design that could be split in half and still pursue its victims in classic sort of 70s slasher style. I thought, a knife-wielding robot cut in half, crawling over the ground after some, poor female victim, and that was sort of the nucleus for the story.
This planted the seed for the Terminator, and when Cameron returned to Los Angeles, he began fleshing it out. Deeply inspired by classic sci-fi authors like Harlan Ellison and Philip K. Dick, he wanted to create something that fused action, suspense, and science fiction with mythic storytelling. He envisioned a time travel narrative, where a soldier from the future is sent back in time to protect a woman who holds the key to humanity's survival, and a robotic assassin with a singular mission: kill her before she can give birth to the leader of the resistance.
Well, I came back from doing Piranha 2, from which I got fired not once but twice.
And he didn't have a nickel in his pocket.
My card had been repossessed, I was totally out of cash, and I wound up sleeping on the floor of Randy Frake's house. And during that time, I was sort of cooking this story.
Well, a thing like that doesn't exist today, so it has to come from the future.
Well, I think I was probably influenced by Alien, which was one of the first science fiction films that really had a female protagonist who was a warrior in and of her own right. And I liked that idea. It appealed to me. It also sort of fit with my view of the female half of the species in general.
And what he was looking to do was to write something that would be so irresistible that no one would not let him direct.
Cameron began writing the screenplay with his close friends and collaborators, producer Galen Hurd and screenwriter William Fisher. Hurd, a former assistant to Roger Corman, understood low-budget filmmaking and would become instrumental in getting the film made. She agreed to produce the movie and even purchased a script from Cameron for $1 on the condition that he would be the one to direct it. The screenplay went through many drafts. Early versions involved two Terminators, a subplot involving the military, and even an ending where the Terminator's CPU survives and becomes Skynet. These ideas were dropped in save for later films, but what emerged was a streamlined, tightly constructed narrative, part sci-fi, part horror, part action thriller.
I just wrote a treatment, longhand, maybe 40 pages, something like that. Now I had a treatment. This was a film that I wanted to make. I needed a producer. I needed a producer that I could trust to protect it and to protect me in the mix. I knew Gail was the type of material that she knew and that she understood, and she knew low-budget effects. So she was a natural choice.
Unfortunately, getting the Terminator financed was no easy task. Studios were hesitant to invest in a film helmed by an untested director, especially one whose only credit was a flop he was fired from. The concept was also seen as too bleak, too risky, and too bizarre. A robot assassin from the future wasn't exactly seen as mainstream in the early 1980s. Eventually, the script found a home with Hemdale Film Production, an independent production company willing to take a chance, while Orion Pictures came on board to distribute. The budget was set to approximately $6.4 million, a modest sum even for the time, which forced Cameron to get creative.
We were turned down by every major studio. However, we did have one connection to Orion Pictures. Barbara Boyle and Francis Dole, who had worked for Roger Corman at New World Pictures, were both employed by Mike Medavoy, and we slipped the script to them, and they loved it. We were doubly blessed in that Lindsley Parsons, who was the head of the LA branch of Film Finances, a completion bond company, believed in us as well. And when there was a lot of pressure on us to take that money out, because of course no one plans on not getting all the shots that are essential in production, no one has the luxury of having additional photography later on. He believed that was the smartest way to approach this film, and he supported us every step of the way.
Casting the Terminator proved to be one of the most critical choices. Initially, Cameron imagined the Terminator as an anonymous, unassuming figure, someone who could blend into a crowd. Lance Henriksen, a friend of Cameron's, was considered for the role, and showed up to a pitch meeting at Orion dressed in Terminator-style leather, smashing through the door and terrifying executives to sell the role. But then Arnold Schwarzenegger entered the picture. Originally, Cameron met with him to discuss the role of Kyle Reese, the human soldier. But after hearing Schwarzenegger speak about how he would portray the killer robot, Cameron realized that Arnold was a Terminator. His sheer physicality, presence, and stoic demeanor made him a natural fit for the role. Ironically, Schwarzenegger was hesitant at first. He didn't want to play a villain and had just come off Conan the Barbarian, but Cameron convinced him by emphasizing how iconic the role would be.
Mike Medavoy called up and said I had to talk to Arnold to play Reese. And I thought, okay, that's fine. That's a lame idea, frankly, but I'll talk to him because, you know, you have to be very political, especially when you're starting out.
Jim says, well, wish me luck. I'm going to go meet Arnold. I'm going to have to pick a fight with Arnold because the only way I could get him out of the movie was to not get along with him, and then, you know, nobody would want to have them all work together. She said, I'm going to go pick a fight with Arnold. If it doesn't go well, you can have the chair and the stereo, you know.
I went to meet with Arnold, found him to be charming, and the entire time that I was talking to him during that lunch, I was thinking, you'd make a great Terminator. He had such a strength of presence that I knew it would translate to the screen.
Basically, they were looking for someone to play the heroic character in the film. And they read the script and they immediately could relate much more to the character of Terminator than the heroic character.
And as it turns out, Arnold didn't want to play Reese at all. Arnold read the script and said, well, I want to play this Terminator guy. And so Jim went from just about ready to pick a fight with him to, that's a good idea.
Everyone else around me said, maybe you should not play a villain. That is not good for your career.
Michael Biehn was then cast as Kyle Reese, the emotional heart of the story, and Linda Hamilton was chosen as Sarah Connor, a character whose arc from damsel in distress to hardened survivor would create one of the greatest female sci-fi action characters of all time.
I saw in Michael the kind of intensity and intelligence that I needed and the physicality.
They liked me a lot. They thought I was right for the role, but they thought I was too regional. They didn't want to cast somebody that was Southern. And myself and my agents were like, well, what are you talking about? You know, I'm not Southern. I'm from Nebraska. You see me again, that was, you know, I kind of realized what had happened. And so they saw me again.
There was something very vulnerable about him, and that was incredibly important, that he not only be an action star, but he have the vulnerability. She also had the ability to transcend the genre and not be someone who simply screams really well, but someone who was believable as the girl next door, who could ultimately become the mother who saves humanity. And that's not an easy transition.
With Linda, I saw the combination of the strength and the kind of the innocence that she needed, because she goes between two poles in that film, and you don't see the strength until the end.
She's a woman that grew and transformed on screen, and that's always a wonderful thing to get to play.
With a limited budget, the production team had to think like rebels. Cameron and the crew shot many scenes without permits, often on the streets of LA late at night. They used natural lighting, practical effects, miniatures, and in-camera tricks to create a believable future war and a convincing killer robot.
My son, Chris, came out to help us with the stands and put his things.
And I was basically there just to muscle the gear.
We literally went out to a location.
It was out in the middle of nowhere.
We were setting up all day for the right light. Not one car had driven by the entire time we were setting up.
We're 5 minutes away from shooting.
And just as we were about to roll, a cop car pulls up, and we were completely unprepared.
We didn't have a permit or anything.
We weren't supposed to be there.
And he pulls up, what are you folks doing? And
excuse me, where's your film permit?
My dad turns around and says to him, well, my son, it's his film school project.
Well, we were helping my son do a film.
And I just stood in the background, smiled, gave him a little...
The policeman was very cooperative and said, okay, he would go hold traffic.
And he changed his whole attitude and says, well, you know, well, if that's the case, then that's fine.
Special effects wizard Stan Winston was brought in to design the Terminator's endoskeleton. The final design, a nightmarish humanoid machine with glowing red eyes and exposed servos, became instantly iconic. Stop-motion animation, puppetry, and full-size animatronics were all used to bring the Terminator to life.
And I was very haughty because, I was the guy, and I saw this painting that he had done of the endoskeleton. I went, oh my God, this guy's awesome. And then I read the script, and suddenly I went from a guy who was sitting on a high horse to a guy who really wanted to work on this film.
Stan kind of signed on and did a lot of work early on, even when the film wasn't greenlit, and was a true believer.
And then finally, Brad Feidel's synthesizer score, created on a Prophet 10 analog synth, added to the film's industrial, haunting atmosphere. His main theme, mechanical, melancholic, and unrelenting, is now inseparable from the identity of the franchise.
It was the idea of this mechanical man and his heartbeat.
He was great because he had no time, he had no money, and we were adding shots all the time in post-production as we'd get them in, and it didn't faze him a bit.
He did the whole score in his garage. It was a cool garage. I mean, he had a lot of good gear.
I had all these individual keyboards, and they had to be played individually. It was all live. Every note is live performed, with the exception of this. I had an Oberheim situation where I could put a little drum machine and a little those things were chained together, but it was their technology. It didn't interface with anything else.
The film opens not in 1984, but in the future, 2029 AD. Against a darkened sky filled with smoke and ash, we see a hunter-killer tank crushing human skulls into dust. The landscape is a war-torn battlefield, twisted rebar, burning wreckage, and machines soaring through the air. This prologue, created through a mixture of miniatures, rear projection, and practical effects, is remarkable not just for what it shows, but how it feels. The blue-tinged hues, the minimalistic music stabs, and the stark narration all build an immediate sense of doom. From the outset, Cameron grounds the story in fate. The war is inevitable. The machines have already taken over, and humanity is on the brink. From the burnt-out husks of the future, we abruptly cut to the streets of 1984 Los Angeles, a gritty, sleazy urban jungle captured in all its grimy glory. Cameron's LA is cold, dangerous, and indifferent, a perfect hunting ground. Then comes the iconic entrance of the Terminator, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, who arrives from the future in a flash of lightning, crouched like a metal beast just born. His naked form, backlit by electricity and smoke, is the ultimate juxtaposition of the human and the inhuman. He looks human, but the silence in his eyes gives away the truth. This is not a man, it is death, and the scene involving the three punks only solidifies this. Minutes later, another time traveler arrives, Michael Biehn's Kyle Reese, whose entrance is notably more chaotic and painful. He falls into a dark alley, convulsing, gasping, running. Where the Terminator rose from his descent with calm menace, Reese emerged as a desperate fugitive covered in scars, hunted from the very moment he arrived. The contrast is brilliant. One is a machine with a singular purpose, the other, a man burdened by trauma and memory. Cameron doesn't tell us who the hero is, he shows us. The city itself becomes a character, indifferent, dangerous, and uncaring. Police are present, but ineffectual. Strangers are either oblivious or hostile. The machines have not yet taken over, but the groundwork has been laid. This is already a society where people are disconnected, technology is everywhere. Answering machines, early computers, security cams, and no one pays attention until it's too late. The score by Brad Fiedel plays a key role here. His use of repetitive synthetic rhythms gives the entire film a mechanical heartbeat, pulsing, unsettling, and cold. But there are also moments of subtle warmth and vulnerability, especially in later scenes with Sarah Connor, that contrast beautifully against the electronic dread.
Huxley still loves me, don't you, baby?
What I love is that Linda Hamilton's Sarah Connor is introduced not as a warrior or legend, but as a normal woman. She works a dead-end job at a diner, is stood up by her date, and struggles to make rent. But that's exactly what makes her so compelling. In a lesser film, she'd either be a passive victim or a Mary Sue. In The Terminator, she's a blank slate, a chrysalis waiting for transformation.
Oh, good.
Nice going.
From the moment Sarah is introduced, Cameron subtly begins her evolution. She's observant, awkwardly kind, but also isolated. The way she interacts with other people, her roommate, her co-workers, paints the portrait of someone longing for connection, unsure of her place in the world, completely unaware that she's about to become one of the most important figures in human history.
So, better than mortal man deserves.
I also really appreciate how the film builds suspense cleverly through intercutting. As Sarah goes about her day, we see the Terminator tracking down and executing a woman named Sarah Connor, coldly working down a phone book hit list.
Come and get me. What the?
It's a horrifying conceit, an unstoppable killer methodically slaughtering innocents based on nothing but a name. We know that Sarah is next, and Cameron milks this tension expertly.
Once again, Sarah Connor, 35, brutally shot to death in her home this afternoon.
More than a monster or an assassin, the T-800 is a philosophical construct wrapped in the illusion of human flesh. It is Skynet's first true infiltrator, a cybernetic organism engineered for one purpose, to end life with absolute efficiency. The origins of the T-800 lie in Skynet's increasingly adaptive tactics during its war of extermination against humanity. Early in the conflict, Skynet deployed crude mechanical units, among them the T-1 tanks and aerial hunter-killers, but it was the later emergence of humanoid infiltration units that shifted the tide. The T-600, a forerunner to the T-800, was wrapped in synthetic rubber skin and utilized for reconnaissance and assassination, but its appearance was crude, its behavior stilted, and it was easily identified by resistance fighters. These limitations forced Skynet to evolve. The result of this evolution was the T-800, the first Terminator capable of not only mimicking human appearance with frightening accuracy, but also functioning on the battlefield with near total independence and efficiency. The T-800 is constructed around a hyper-alloy combat chassis, a hardened endoskeleton composed of advanced titanium and tungsten alloys. This skeletal framework is far more than an armored structure, it is a mobile weapons platform. The alloy provides the T-800 with extreme resilience against conventional weaponry, blunt trauma, and low-level explosives. Its limbs can withstand crushing force, its joints are articulated with servos that allow for fluid but powerful movement, and it can punch through car doors, lift human beings effortlessly, and continue operating after sustaining what would be catastrophic damage to any other organic life form. In this way, the T-800 is built not just to kill, but to endure. It can operate in extreme temperatures, through fire, and even with significant mechanical damage, and most terrifyingly, it will not stop until its objective is complete. But it is not simply a walking tank. What makes a T-800 truly horrifying and effective is the overlay of living tissue that conceals its mechanical core. Unlike its predecessors, the T-800 is not masked by rubber facsimiles, it is clad in actual biological flesh. Skynet, in its infinite cunning, learned to grow and cultivate living human tissue over machine. This tissue bleeds, it bruises, it decays, it sweats and responds to heat and cold. It even ages, and it is indistinguishable from a real human body until injured or dissected. This living sheath allows the T-800 to pass as human under any level of casual scrutiny, to move among civilians, approach targets unseen, and disappear into crowds. The specific unit model we encounter is a T-800 Model 101, a designation that refers to the physical appearance of the infiltration chassis. It is implied that Skynet scanned and replicated the appearance of captured resistance soldiers to provide its infiltrators with familiar faces, or to craft identities that would invoke either trust or fear depending on the mission. The T-800 systems are built around a powerful neural net processor, described as a learning computer. However, this capability is intentionally restricted by default. In combat scenarios or high-risk operations, the CPU is set to read-only mode to prevent deviation from mission parameters or the development of independent thought. In other words, while the machine is theoretically capable of learning and adapting like a human brain, Skynet deliberately suppressed that feature to ensure loyalty and predictability.
A CPU is a neural net processor, a learning computer, but Skynet presets the switch to read only when we are sent out alone.
Only under unusual circumstances or through human intervention, as seen in later entries in the franchise, can this restriction be lifted, allowing the Terminator to begin mimicking not just human form, but human behavior, morality, and empathy.
And if someone comes up to you with an attitude, you say, "Eat me."
Hasta la vista, baby.
Despite its lack of emotion, the T-800 is an intelligent predator. It is capable of reasoning, investigating, and tactically adapting to its environment. In the film, it procures clothing and weapons through force. It operates vehicles with ease. It navigates urban infrastructures. It accesses public records, looking for Sarah Connor and systematically eliminating all matches to her name. It even mimics voices with uncanny accuracy, recording and replicating speech through its audio analysis suite.
And you won't tell me what's going on? I am worried sick, dear.
I love you too, sweetheart.
This use of deception, cold, pragmatic, and effective, demonstrates that the T-800 is not just a brute enforcer, it is a thinking machine.
Hey buddy, got a dead cat in there or what?
Fuck you, asshole.
Its interface, glimpsed through its red-hued point of view, reveals a heads-up display filled with scrolling text, data overlays, and targeting matrices. The text itself is a mix of programming code and diagnostic feedback, and though much of it is intentionally obfuscated in the film, it serves to reinforce the Terminator's non-human perception of the world. It sees in threat assessments, in calculations, in vectors and probabilities. The human world is rendered in terms of function and obstacle. The tension peaks when Sarah, now realizing she's being followed, seeks refuge in a club called Tech Noir, a symbolic name nodding to both the genre and aesthetic of the film. The scene is masterfully edited. Reese is tracking her, the Terminator is closing in, and Sarah is unknowingly caught between a protector and a predator. It's a moment of pure suspense. When the Terminator spots her, raises his gun and fires, the entire film explodes into kinetic energy. Reese dives in, guns blaze, and the chase begins. But this isn't just action for the sake of spectacle, it's character revelation through chaos. Reese proves his loyalty and desperation. The Terminator demonstrates its indestructibility, and Sarah, she realizes her world is about to change forever. The moment Reese says,
"Come with me if you want to live,"
we cross a narrative threshold. As the pair flee in a stolen car, the Terminator becomes a film about momentum, unrelenting pace, and a tone of constant paranoia. The T-800 is never far behind. Every moment of safety is temporary, a fragile illusion always shattered by the mechanical inevitability of the pursuer. In this way, it feels almost existential. No matter how far they run, the future is catching up. This is where Cameron fully leans into the film's central metaphor. The Terminator is more than a machine. It's fate, it's death, it's inevitability. And like death,
it can't be bargained with, it can't be reasoned with, and it absolutely will not stop until you are dead.
In lesser hands, the scene where Kyle finally explains the situation to Sarah could have been dull or overly expository, but it's pulled off with tension and strong performances. Reese, exhausted and haunted, delivers the truth with the conviction of a man who's lived it. Bean's portrayal of Kyle Reese is key here. He's not a confident action hero, he's a broken soldier, a refugee from a nightmare, barely holding it together.
Cyborgs don't feel pain. I do. A few years from now, all this, it's gone. It was the machines that decided our fate in a microsecond. Extermination.
What makes this sequence work is the emotional undercurrent beneath the sci-fi jargon. Reese isn't just explaining time travel or cyborg assassins, he's revealing the existential horror of his own existence. He was born after the bombs fell, he's never known love or peace or sunlight. He's not just fighting to save Sarah, he's fighting to preserve a future that still has a soul.
Look, I am not stupid, you know. They cannot make things like that yet.
Not for about 40 years.
Sarah's reaction is just as vital. She doesn't immediately believe him. She panics and is overwhelmed. She reacts like a real person would. This emotional authenticity is a huge part of what grounds the film. Its characters behave like real people.
Get out of the car!
Unfortunately for the pair, the dynamic chase takes a detour when Kyle and Sarah are arrested and taken to the police station. Here, Sarah is placed under the protection of Lieutenant Traxler and Detective Vukovich, while Kyle is interrogated and dismissed as a lunatic.
But this cyborg, if it's metal...
Surrounded by living tissue.
Oh, right.
I didn't build a thing.
Okay.
The entire stretch reinforces the hopelessness of institutional systems in this kind of situation. The police are completely out of their depth. Dr. Silberman, the smug criminal psychologist, represents the film's quiet satire of psychiatry and academia, institutions more concerned with labeling than listening. He treats Reese as a curiosity, not a credible witness.
This is great stuff. I could make a career out of this guy. You see how clever this part is? How it doesn't require a shred of proof?
And then, like a hellish punctuation mark, the Terminator invades the police station. The iconic,
"I'll be back,"
is delivered with a chilling calm of an executioner. What follows is a massacre, cold, brutal, and systematic. Cameron shoots the sequence like a slasher film. Stark lighting, narrow hallways, panicked prey, and an emotionless killer. It's also a genius inversion of audience expectations. In most films, the police station is the safe haven. Here, it's a death trap. As Kyle and Sarah manage to escape the carnage, the movie transitions into its emotional core. These scenes, hiding in a parking garage, under a bridge, stealing supplies and resting in a motel, are where the Terminator reveals its heart. Reese, for all his toughness, is a man shaped by longing. He's been told stories about Sarah his entire life. He's seen her photo, he came back in time not just to save her, but because he's in love with the idea of her, the myth of the woman who gave birth to humanity's savior, and Bean handles it with such raw sincerity.
So much pain.
Pain can be controlled. You just disconnect it.
So you feel nothing?
I came across time for you, Sarah. I love you. I always have.
Sarah, meanwhile, begins to evolve. She starts asking questions. She begins thinking tactically. She comforts Reese, and when she realizes what she represents as the future of humanity, she begins to accept the weight of destiny.
You're talking about things that I haven't done yet in the past tense. It's driving me crazy.
Look, Reese, I didn't ask for this honor, and I don't want it. Any of it.
You must be stronger than you imagine you can be. You must survive, or I will never exist.
The women in your time, what are they like?
Good fighters.
It's not what I meant. Was there someone special?
This leads to the much-discussed love scene, which, though sudden, is absolutely critical. It's not just a physical connection, it's an act of defiance against a future without love. It's also the moment where John Connor, the future savior, is conceived, another twist of fate that reinforces the film's closed-loop time travel logic. Reese came back because of John, but John exists because of Reese.
Maybe it'll help if you know that in the few hours that we had together, we loved a lifetime's worth.
But at the same time, the machine keeps coming. Visually, Cameron reinforces this idea with stark contrasts. The cold, metallic interior of the police station is contrasted with the warm, intimate tones of the motel room. The city becomes less populated, the lighting becomes harsher, the shadows are growing, and the sense of impending judgment looms ever closer. We also notice that Sarah's different now. She's alert, focused, and aware of her importance. Kyle, meanwhile, appears content, even hopeful for the first time. It's a brilliant touch. Just as the characters dare to imagine a future, the future returns. After killing Sarah's roommate and boyfriend, the Terminator kills her own mother and assumes her voice, using it to find them.
Oh, but honey, I need to know where I can reach you. You tell me to hide out up here at the cabin, and you won't tell me what's going on?
The action moves to the streets of Los Angeles once again, and this time Cameron pulls no punches. The motorbike and tanker truck chases are harrowing, destructive set pieces that exemplify Cameron's skill at blending raw, practical action with psychological tension. What makes the chase so effective is its visceral simplicity. No fancy CGI, no over-choreographed spectacle, just high-speed pursuit, gunfire, explosions, and dread. Reese and Sarah try to escape, with Kyle desperately attempting to slow the T-800 down using pipe bombs, each one representing humanity's primitive ingenuity against the machine's superior force. The tanker explosion is a moment of catharsis. The Terminator, engulfed in flames, stumbles, collapses, and appears to die. For a moment, it seems like the nightmare is over, but then the endoskeleton rises from the fire. This scene is more than just a stunning visual effect achieved through a mixture of puppetry, stop-motion animation, and animatronics. It's a metaphor, the machine reborn through fire. Just as Sarah is going to be reborn through suffering, the Terminator emerges as its purest self, stripped of flesh, emotionless, skeletal, and utterly alien. In a story that has echoed themes of fate, prophecy, and rebirth, this moment almost feels biblical. The chase leads Sarah and the wounded Reese into a robotics factory, an inspired choice of setting that carries symbolic weight. Here, in the very birthplace of automation and industrial ambition, humanity will make a stand against its synthetic offspring. As they maneuver through the machinery, the tension is suffocating. The sound design is crucial here. Metallic clanks, hissing hydraulics, and the echo of running footsteps create an oppressive atmosphere. The factory mirrors the Terminator itself, cold, inhuman, all-consuming. Reese, already wounded, places a pipe bomb into the machine's midsection. Sacrificing himself, the blasts the Terminator into pieces. But once again, it does not stop. Now reduced to a crawling torso, it continues to pursue Sarah with mindless mechanical resolve. Sarah, bleeding and alone, crawls away from the metal corpse towards a hydraulic press, and in this moment, she's reborn. With shaking hands and raw rage, she allures the Terminator under the press, slams the button, and crushes it with brute force. It's an act of defiance and closure. The final line, "You're terminated," is more than a quip. It's the moment the hunted becomes the hunter, and is the culmination of Sarah's transformation. She survives not because of her training, strength, or firepower, but because of her sheer will. The mother of the future has been forged in blood and steel. The film then ends with a quiet epilogue. Sarah, now visibly pregnant with John Connor, travels through a dusty Mexican highway. She's hardened, wary, and burdened with the knowledge of what's to come. She records audio messages for her son, passing down the lessons of pain, love, and resilience, the core human qualities that machines can never replicate.
Should I tell you about your father? Boy, that's a tough one. Will it affect your decision to send him here, knowing that he is your father?
A young boy snaps a Polaroid of her, the same photo that Kyle Reese carried through time, and the loop is closed. Cause and effect become one. Then as Sarah prepares to drive into the horizon, a storm gathers above. The little boy warns her.
"There's a storm coming in."
To which she replies,
"I know."
It's the perfect final note. They may have won the battle, but the war is still to come.
I think belief in the film is a critical factor, certainly for the actors, but also for everyone who's at a creative level. There's something also about guerrilla filmmaking where people just love the energy of it, and they love to have a film that they do believe in, that they can throw themselves into.
On a budget of roughly $6.4 million, The Terminator accomplished what many big-budget studio films could not. It built a believable, terrifying future, gave birth to an iconic cinematic villain, and pioneered a visual style that would shape sci-fi and action cinema for decades.
If you want to know everything you need to know about Jim Cameron's films, go look at Terminator 1, because it's all there. All the essentials are there, and everything that he has continued to grow into and to expand, all the roots of it are right there.
James Cameron helmed the project with an almost mechanical efficiency. Every scene serves a purpose. Every shot escalates tension. There's no indulgence, no waste. His direction blends the tight plotting of noir, the intensity of horror, and the momentum of action films, all within a streamlined 107-minute runtime. Cameron's greatest strength lies in his visual storytelling. He doesn't rely on dialogue to build the world, he shows it. From the smoky back alleys of 1984 LA to the battlefields of 2029, he evokes atmosphere with stark imagery and kinetic blocking. Action is also never mindless, it's character-driven, and tension is built through silence, stillness, and the threat of movement.
Part of it was timing, part of it was that we really did deliver a good film, and a film that at the time became part of the whole zeitgeist of America in 1984.
I was fairly new to that process, so it was exciting to me, and I was just totally focused on the whole process. You know, I thought, I need to do a film myself. As director, I need to create this. I can't pay somebody to do it, I don't have any money, so I'll do it myself, I'll do everything myself. Necessity's a mother, as they say.
Linda Hamilton's performance is rooted in vulnerability, one that hardens into steel. Sarah Connor begins the film as an ordinary woman, but Cameron understood the power of transformation, and the Terminator is ultimately her story. Her arc from timid waitress to hardened survivor is not sudden or romanticized. It's painful, earned, and deeply human. Her fear and confusion is real, and by the end, when she crushes the Terminator in the industrial press, her strength is real.
We had a great working relationship. We both worked extremely hard on it. I think it was more difficult for her because a lot of that stuff was very, very grueling, running and, you know, jumping and fighting, but she was game and she was good. I think Jim played off that a little bit. I think she got, you know, there were times that she got, you know, frustrated, tired, angry, and dirty, pissed off, and I think it absolutely worked for the character.
The suggestion is that whether you're male or female, but specifically if you're female, you'll have capacities that others around you may not recognize and you may not even recognize in yourself. But if put to the test, they will emerge.
It wasn't just shoot 'em up, blow 'em up, but you know, there was a story, a love story that was a lot larger than life, and I think it drew a lot of people to us that ordinarily wouldn't have liked the picture.
Part of it was timing, part of it was that we really did deliver a good film, and if
Michael Biehn's portrayal of Kyle Reese is beautifully understated, a soldier defined not by bravado, but by desperation. He's a product of a ruined world, born into a post-apocalyptic hellscape, sent back in time with nothing but a mission and the ghost of a woman he's never met. He's the embodiment of sacrifice, a man who has no future except the one he helps preserve.
And that's why we went with Michael, because he ultimately combined those two skills, the skill to be incredibly physical and believable in that part, as well as the emotional connection that he had with Sarah.
Arnold Schwarzenegger's performance is to stand out for good reason. While often praised for his physicality and presence, it's the absence of humanity in his portrayal that makes the character so chilling. He speaks little, shows no emotion, and kills without hesitation. He is pure function, and Schwarzenegger plays the machine with intense physical discipline.
It's just that sometimes things click with the audience and you create a character that really hits home.
I'll be back.
One of the shocks of the film was that people related to the Terminator so much. And I think it's because there's an awful lot of pent-up rage and frustration, and a lot of that frustration is because we're, you know, in a crowded urban society and job pressures and things like that, and people don't get to act out these fantasies. And we live in an age of weapons where you can't just punch somebody without them pulling out a gun and shooting you. You can't yell at somebody on the freeway without them shooting you with an AK-47. So there's a lot of pent-up rage and hostility, and I think the Terminator was a release for that. I think that we're also reacting psychologically to this kind of dehumanization, or programming ourselves to interact with strangers. And I think that that's why the kind of the android myth has become so popular in recent years and in films, because it sort of answers that question. Or if nothing else, it says, we have become so dehumanized that a machine could pass for human easily in our society.
But anybody who thinks that Terminator is a cynical movie didn't get it. Far from it. It's a film that says the least among us is probably the most important person in the world.
His movements are calculated, deliberate, and devoid of excess, every motion reflecting the inner workings of a mechanical being. Cinematographer Adam Greenberg creates a world drenched in shadow, grime, and harsh industrial light. The film's visual identity is soaked in blue filters, smoke, and harsh neon lighting, giving it a cold, dreamlike quality that echoes both noir and cyberpunk aesthetics. The lighting is especially important. It constantly separates the human from the inhuman. The Terminator is frequently lit from below or behind, casting long shadows or bathing it in harsh, unnatural light. Sarah and Reese, by contrast, are often lit more softly, until their world becomes just as cold as the Terminator's. Greenberg's use of close-ups and medium shots keeps the action grounded and intimate. Even in chase sequences, the camera rarely pulls back too far, emphasizing the claustrophobic dread of being hunted. And when the action explodes, such as in the police station massacre or the truck chase, the camera maintains clarity and geography, a skill sorely lacking in many modern action films.
The thing that's interesting about that character is that all the exposition in the piece, who the Terminator was, where he came from, what happened in the past, what's going to happen in the future, who she was, who I was, who the Terminator was, I had to tell that story. Reese told the story from beginning to end about what's happening, because he's the only person who knew. Well, that's exposition, and that usually is a showstopper. That usually stops movies dead in their tracks. But what Jim did, and the brilliance, I think, of the Terminator is that story was told on the move. It was always told while car chases were going on, while we were running, while we were hiding, while we were being shot at. I was telling the story. You know, the Terminator's this, he's that, you know, and we're screeching around corners. So he mixed the action and the exposition, and it made it much easier for me to not become boring.
Editor Mark Goldblatt cuts the Terminator with precision. The film is a perfect example of narrative economy. Every scene moves the plot forward, reveals characters, or escalates danger. There's a steady build in intensity. The action sequences grow larger and more chaotic, but the tension is always anchored in the characters. The editing also does a good job of maintaining temporal clarity, a challenge given the film's flashbacks to Reese's future. These scenes could easily disorient the viewer, but they're always placed with intention, triggered by memory, emotion, or trauma. The result is a film that flows seamlessly, despite its temporal complexity.
We were lucky that we had both trained under Roger Corman, and Roger taught us some very important lessons. And one of those was that oftentimes films are made in post-production. And we headed into filming knowing that we wouldn't know all of the things that were missing until we'd had an opportunity to cut the film together. And we set aside money for that photography.
One of the Terminator's most overlooked triumphs is its sound design, which reinforces the central themes: industrialism, automation, and inhuman force. The sounds of the Terminator itself, the whirring of servos, the stomp of its feet, the hydraulic hiss of its movements are mechanical and unnerving. Even when encased in flesh, the machine has a sonic identity. Gunshots are also sharp and jarring, lacking the typical Hollywood polish, and explosions echo with weight. Even more impressive is the sound mixing in quieter scenes, all adding to the sense that the world is already on the brink of collapse.
We were submitted quite a few samples for possible composers for the film. And needless to say, when you come to music, that's where you literally have no money left.
And we had that sit-down talk where the filmmaker tells you, sometimes before he shows you his film, what he feels the film is about and what elements are in it. And I'd been through a lot of those talks, you know, the philosophy and the depth of it and the dream of the filmmaker. And then in many cases they show you the picture and you're sitting there going, where is that movie? Where's the movie they were talking about? You know, it's like, I don't see it. When, you know, Jim had a lot of big feelings about the film and passion for it, so when he spoke about it, it was very impressive, and I'm sort of, part of my brain's going, well, let's see, you know, and I'm watching the film, and, you know, 10 minutes in, I'm going, it's here. Wow, it's really here. What he's talking about is on the screen, you know, the depth of it and the mood and the energy of it and the intensity of it. And so I'm sitting going, I gotta do this, gotta do this. So we're watching the film and instead of being like, well, let's see, I'm going, oh, please, please, I hope you're gonna hire me for this movie.
I've mentioned this before, but Brad Feidel's electronic score is one of the most defining elements of the film. The soundtrack is raw, haunting, and mechanical. The now famous main theme, a pulsing metallic rhythm with mournful melody layered atop, captures the film's core tension, the clash between humanity and machine. What makes it so effective is how diegetic it feels. It doesn't just accompany the film, it feels like part of the machine.
I had to literally sit there live and change the tempo and try to get them to match. So if my Prophet 10 was going boom, 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 and the other thing was going do, 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 do. Part of the nature of the score is me trying to get control of the machines. While the machines are trying to get control of the people in the movie, I'm sitting here desperately trying to get control of these machines.
Production designer George Costello does a great job crafting two distinct worlds: the rundown, indifferent sprawl of 1980s LA and the apocalyptic hellscape of 2029. The present-day city is not polished or stylized. It's mundane, almost dismal. Dingy apartment blocks, greasy diners, cluttered police stations. These sets ground the story in gritty realism, and when it comes to the future scenes, built with miniatures, rubble and practical effects, they are grim and believable.
We did the first Terminator for I think, the cost of your motorhome on the second film. Or your oatmeal budget.
Of course, the most remarkable technical feat of the Terminator is its practical effects work, led by the legendary Stan Winston. Winston brought the Terminator to life using a combination of puppetry, animatronics, stop motion, and prosthetics. The endoskeleton itself, with glowing red eyes and metallic joints, is one of the most iconic creature designs ever. Winston's full-size puppet was used in numerous scenes, and the level of detail is staggering.
Meeting Jim, seeing his artwork, seeing the endoskeleton, reading the script, slam dunk, not a question, this was going to be a memorable movie.
And the great thing about Jim is that he is not only great at screenwriting, but he's an artist as well.
It was the art of storytelling, and that's the brilliance of Jim Cameron. That's the brilliance of Terminator 1. I've done a lot of things over the years that are better technically than Terminator. Not a lot of stories that were better than Terminator.
But perhaps what's most astonishing about the Terminator is its legacy. This film didn't just launch a franchise, it launched careers, redefined genres, and set the tone for an entire era of science fiction. It made Cameron a household name, and established Arnold Schwarzenegger as one of cinema's most iconic screen presences. It also paved the way for a sequel that many regard as one of the greatest action films ever made, but it's the original that laid the foundation. The Terminator didn't have the spectacle of its successor, but it had something else: urgency, innovation, and absolute terror.
When the movie came out, I remember the first thing that happened was that they said, oh my God, we have as many women seeing the movie as men.
Right.
So we should change our ad campaign. And I said, I told you guys,
exactly.
This is what's going to happen.
But then, of course, they'd already spent all their ad money, and they didn't spend any more ad money. So
exactly,
the ship had sailed.
Exactly,
Right.
They were like frantically running around and coming up with ways of letting the women know that it is a movie that they can also enjoy.
It was impossible to anticipate that the film would get the kind of almost universal positive reviews that we got, and that the film would open up and maintain the same box office week in and week out for a number of weeks.
We all did our jobs, we did well. It really shows the power of good acting and good storytelling. I think that that's the best accomplishment that we collectively came to on that film.